Can you actually be hypnotized by your own trauma? Yep, we're diving into that today. Full disclosure, I really don't intend to trigger anybody. Yes, of course, we're talking about trauma, so you may feel something come up in this video. And if you do, I really encourage you to actually stick through to the end with me because there's some really, really valuable pieces of information here as to what you may be experiencing, what you may have experienced. And bringing those to light is actually part of the healing process. So, if you do find yourself triggered, that is not my intent, but I really, really, really encourage you to hang in there with me because, quite frankly, I know you can. So, keep watching. We're diving into a pretty important topic and one that's very dear to my heart. So, stay tuned. Hello, everybody. My name is Chelsea. I am an intuitive hypnotherapist, and I specialize in turning trauma and self-sabotage into love and empowerment. Trauma. Holy shit, if we don't all have it by the end of 2021, I will be thoroughly shocked. And I'll probably be pretty sure that one or two people are psychopaths. It's a big, prevalent issue in our society. In fact, a lot of the human condition is trying to heal some form of trauma or another. Trauma doesn't always have to be the big regressive PTSD flashbacks from, say, war or violence or horrible, car crashes or near-death experiences. It doesn't have to be the very prevalent abuse, sexually, physically, mentally, otherwise. Sometimes trauma enters our system in ways that other people would not find traumatic. Really, what trauma is it's any kind of occurrence that your brain, your own brain, cannot cope with in the moment. That puts you into fight, flight, or freeze. Then what happens is it creates sort of disjointed memories. It creates trauma responses. It can really wreak havoc on the brain while still remaining almost completely hidden or repressed. So with all that being said, it's a complicated thing. One of my favorite resources is the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I really hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, somebody please correct me in the comments. But it is a fantastic book, both for helping you understand your own trauma, but also if you are with somebody, if you know somebody and love somebody who has experienced trauma, this is a fantastic resource for beginning to understand a little bit of what's really going on in their minds. But let's really dive into it because there's another very interesting hypnotic perspective, and you guys know I'll geek out about this all day. So, can you be hypnotized by your own trauma? And the answer, in my opinion, is yes. Because let's go back to the basics. What is a trance? A trance is an intense state of focus. It's that zoned in feeling, or some people would describe it as zoned out, but it's an intense state of focus on something. Now, when we go through trauma, like let's say, for instance, abuse, there is something in the brain that when we are experiencing that abuse in the moment, we go into fight, flight, or freeze. And that in itself is a trance by that definition, because your brain is focused on A, fighting it off, B, getting the fuck out of there, pardon my language, or C, hiding, freezing, being still, not being found, not aggravating the situation. There's been proposed a fourth response, which is called fawn, which is where you start instantly appeasing whatever it is that's threatening you. But I think that in this case is not so prevalent because you're still in that conscious sense to, work the situation. But that can also be a trance depending on your own response. So Remember, when you're in trance, you are open to suggestion. It's a psychological state of the mind, and unless you are already very present to say at the very beginning, nope, I am not going to take any suggestion, I am not going to take any information in, because what is hypnosis? It's when your brain accepts a piece of information as a truth. And I'll link all of these videos in my descriptions that go over this definition a little more thoroughly. But that is, so when we're in trance, we are open to suggestion. And fight, flight, or freeze is a pretty powerful trance. We are focused on our survival. I can't think of anything more powerful to focus on. So now when that happens, usually with trauma, one of two things will create those suggestions. Either A, again, usually like in the case of trauma being done to you by another human, suggestions will be embedded. So during that abuse, abusers never just stop at their horrible action, right? Usually they are saying things. You're worthless. You don't deserve love. I'm the only one who's going to love you. You are ugly. You're fat. You're a waste of whatever. Really, really horrible things, which, spiritually we can all acknowledge that they are acting out their own pain, but it's never right. It is never, ever, ever acceptable to exercise your own pain on somebody, especially in such horrible, damaging ways. But that's what's happening. As the victim's brain is in fight, flight, or freeze, trying to defend themselves, even from a mental or emotional abuse state, that still puts you into fight, flight, or freeze. Then the abuser is also embedding these little commands, probably not intentionally, probably not consciously, but that is the effect of their words. Those words are getting accepted a lot more easily than if, to say, you were at lunch with somebody and they said, you don't deserve it. That could still be very traumatic. But generally speaking, when you're in that trance, it's a lot more powerful. So, and this is also a good note for anybody who has loved ones in abusive relationships and you're having trouble understanding why they can't get away, is because in that hypnotic state of fight or flight, they're being programmed. And what's happening is new neural pathways are creating the story that it is actually safer to stay than to leave. And it's a really, really difficult situation to overcome until you're conscious of it, or occasionally until your fight, flight, or freeze response begins to tell you to fly, begins to tell you that it is actually really not safe to be here. But that usually takes a very intense moment or several. So for those of you who are finding yourself in that situation and are screaming at the movie screen of your friend going through this, hopefully this helps you. Hopefully this helps give you some peace, and you can only be there for them in the ways that you are capable. But I do hope that whatever ways you're capable, this helps give you some understanding and some, I know obviously you have a lot of compassion, but I hope this gives you a little background information, and I hope this helps you personally too. The other way that we can be suggestible in the state of fight, flight, or freeze is we create our own embedded commands. We create our own suggestions as a means of figuring out how to survive this mess. Again, going back to the example of abuse. Our minds are in fight, flight, or freeze, and the mind will come up with a way to alleviate the situation. Okay, that's it. I have to be perfect. I have to be perfect. And then that way I won't be doing anything to piss this person off, and I'll be safe. I have to become what this person expects me to be, and I have to lose my entire identity because then this person will be pleased and I'll be safe. I have to fight back and be violent because that's the only way that I can save myself, is I have to scream and kick and fight. And yes, those are all very, very important survival mechanisms. And again, I'm kind of the opinion if fight is your pattern, and you have to fight to get away, please do. Kick, scream, scratch, claw, bite, get yourself safe. But our brains then don't know when to shut that off because, again, we've been implanting this suggestion. And the thing that makes this so particularly powerful is actually something that in the therapeutic setting, when I'm working with clients, I love to utilize. This can actually be a very beneficial mechanism because when I give my clients space to come to the conclusion of, I need to release that now, don't I? That is more powerful to them than anything I could suggest. So on one hand, it's a very beautiful development that we've created in our unconscious mind that we can come up with our own solutions. But when it's coming from a place of trauma and when it's coming from a place of survival, that can wreak havoc. Those conclusions that we draw can wreak havoc on our lives going forward once we're away from that situation. So how does this play out in our lives? Once everything is in the past and safe, how does our hypnosis, how does that programming continue to play out? And a lot of us who have experienced trauma, a lot of us who have been with somebody who has experienced trauma can already tell you on a basic instinct level what happens. It causes erratic behavior. Flashbacks are actually a form of regression. That person is actually really living in that moment. And it doesn't always have to be a vivid seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching everything that was going on in that moment kind of flashback. It can just be the emotional body that's flashing back. A trauma can be triggered, and you can be fully aware of what's going on. You can know that you're in the present. You can know logically that you're dealing with another person. But if they say one phrase that triggers you, your emotional body will be sent all the way back to whatever time that was. And it gets very, very difficult to communicate. It takes a very, very, very strong conscious effort to communicate through that. But really, another definition that we could use for the term hypnosis is it's the program through which we run our lives. If human beings are all computers, which in some senses we really are, the brain is a very effective giant computer. It runs through programs. And we have helpful programs like eat when you're hungry, work to make a living so that you can purchase food to eat when you're hungry. It's easier to be nicer to humans than it is to be aggressive because then you get what you want. Like, we all have these little societal programs, and most of them are pretty benign. But then we get our individual programs from our experiences, programs from our experiences with others. And those are the programs that can really, really affect our lives. So the way this happens is again, there can be regression. There can be the program of whenever I am triggered, I go back to that moment. And that's a pretty common trauma response. There can also be the programming of repetition. When we go through traumatic experiences, but we don't quite manage to deal with them and get them from that little storage cabinet in the back of our unconscious mind and bring it forward to our conscious mind so that we can see it, acknowledge it, and begin to heal it. Our unconscious minds are super powerful, guys. I mean, ridiculously super, super powerful. And our unconscious minds will guide us throughout our lives to repeat those scenarios with other people in the hopes of having us wake up one day and say, oh, you know what? This is my trauma. I'm in a bad situation. I need to get out of this, and I need to understand and heal this so that I don't get here again. And some of us catch it. And I think a lot more of us are beginning to catch it because there's been such a movement and an upsurge in mental health awareness. So I'm really super encouraged by that. But some of us never do. Some of us just keep repeating the same pattern and can't figure out why we can't just be with a good person, why we can't just keep a job, why we can't just make it work. And that is also that is a really powerful thing that can be healed through hypnotherapy, which is really fantastic, because once we heal that, then it's like killing that first vampire. All the others just kind of disappear. But also the trauma responses throughout our lives, little tiny things that we don't realize we're doing that are in response to keeping us safe from another trauma. That's the other thing. For instance, I'm still working on it, because now I actually love what I do. So it's hard not to be a workaholic now, because I just enjoy what I do. But there was a time when I was unable to get out of a bad situation due to finances. And in that state of fight or flight, whenever I was in a fight with my ex, or whenever I was, feeling especially trapped, my unconscious mind came to the conclusion, I will never be here again. I will never be at anyone's mercy. I will never be under anyone's control. So I worked 3 jobs, even when I was away from that relationship, even when I was making good money at one job, I still had little side projects that I had to do. I was always constantly thinking, how can I make more money? How can I make more money? And it's been only fairly recently that I've caught it, because sometimes society rewards our trauma responses, don't they? Perfectionism is something that a lot of healers, a lot of spiritual people, a lot of mental health professionals will say is a generally unhealthy thing. And yet society rewards perfectionism. We reward the people who do a great job, even at the cost of their health. We reward the person who stays 3 hours late after work just to make sure the project is perfect so that they can hand it to their boss and their boss can look great. Isn't that interesting? For as much as we are aware of trauma these days, we also really, really reward keeping it under wraps. So especially if you're a perfectionist, especially if you're a compulsive workaholic, compulsive working out is another one. That's a anxiety release. That is a body image thing for some people. It's great to move your body to be healthy. I encourage that for everybody. But if you're going to the gym for 3 hours a day and feeling guilty if you don't, check in. That's all I'm asking. Check in. Also, there's other more well-known trauma responses. Erratic behavior. If you're in a relationship with somebody who is highly erratic and they're a good person, just terribly wounded, and they're highly emotional to little tiny things, that might be a sign that they're acting out a trauma response. Now, depending on the level of, how willing they are to heal, I'm not saying to stay in that relationship. I'm just explaining what might be going on for them. And then from there, once you understand, then it's your call and your call as a couple to see how this can work, or if this is best worked out with another person. There's eating disorders. Eating disorders are very, very common trauma responses. They're very, very common attempts at control or attempts at safety. Weight gain is a very big trauma response, because weight from a emotional and unconscious and soul perspective is a protective layer from the world. It's very common, especially with us gals. And it's especially common with sexual abuse victims. And also I think women are just biologically designed to hold weight. So it's a tough one. But there's that. There's also attachment to the story. Sometimes trauma victims will actually become more enmeshed. They'll say, you know what, that's it. I'm just a screw up. I'm just, this is it. This is me. I just do better when I have a chaotic life. um, I can't do anything, right? And you can be sitting with them for 3 hours trying to tell them, no, honey, you're beautiful, you are intelligent, you're smart. Do you not see all this? And they'll just dig in their heels more, because that at least feels consistent to them. Their story will feel consistent to them, if nothing else in their life, because there is that sense of lack of safety, lack of consistency, lack of knowing what's going to go on, but at least they have their story. So I really, really hope that this video has given you some information. If it has, please like and subscribe to this channel so that I know to keep making more content like this. Also, leave a comment if you've experienced something and either you're curious about it or you just want to let us know how you've been healing on your own trauma journey. No matter where you are on your healing journey, please continue to seek healing. If you've experienced trauma, let me tell you, it does not go away by just ignoring it alone. So please seek therapy, seek hypnotherapy, seek acupuncture, Reiki, energy healing, spiritual healing. Seek whatever works, but don't give up on your healing journey, because I promise you there is another side. There is an other end of this. And once you get there, your life is going to blossom in ways that I really, really wish for you. So until next time, sending you a big hug and a big burst of encouragement, because you've got this.